her baby. So how they synthesize? As I mentioned before, they are peptide and protein hormones. They are producing from the DNA, and as a consequence of transcription and translation processes. So this figure, it shows the steps of the production and synthesis of the protein hormone or peptide hormone. So first step is the transcription. Transcription from the genetic part of the DNA to messenger RNA. Then messenger RNA migrates to the rough endoplasmic reticula or endoplasmic reticula to produce pre-prohormone, and then translation of pre-prohormone in the ribosomes into the prohormones, and then prohormones it enter or stored in the Golgi apparatus. So in the Golgi apparatus is stored as a prohormone. So here it's stored as a prohormone. Once it is needed, the prohormone broken into the hormone, and it released via exocytosis or secretion. It is via exocytosis, extracellular into extracellular space, and enter into the blood vessels for doing its action in the next action or next job. Yes, we have the second type of hormone according to the nature or structure, chemical structure. We have amines. So amines is a small molecule lipid insoluble derived from the amino acids. There are two groups of the hormone derived from the amino acids. We have acids tyrosine. So tyrosine is an amino acid. We have a thyroid hormone, are basically a double tyrosine with the critical incorporation of 3 or 4 iodine atoms. We have catecholamines, including epinephrine and norepinephrine, which are used both hormone used as both hormones and neurotransmitter. So we have amine hormones, as I mentioned before. We have it derived from the tyrosine. The tyrosine is an amino acid. It can convert to the hormone, which is called thyroid hormones. We have two types, thyroxine T4 and T3. Thyroid iodothyronine or tetraiodothyronine T4. So here we have it's bind to the 4 iodide or 4 atoms of the iodine. Here we have 3 iodine atom. So it is tyrosine derived amino hormones. And another type of the hormones that is derived from the tyrosine it's called catecholamines. Catecholamines, we have dopamine, epinephrine, and norepinephrine. So they 3 types of the catecholamines. So if you notice here, we have 2 tyrosine or 2 amino acids. Tyrosine here, we have 2 tyrosine here. We have only 1 tyrosine and it is called dopamine and norepinephrine and epinephrine. So we have another type of hormones or another classification of hormone according to the structure or chemical nature, the steroid hormone or steroids. Steroids are cyclic hydrocarbon lipid soluble, more specifically derivative of cholesterol. So they derived from the cholesterol. The cholesterol is the precursor of the steroids hormones. They are lipid soluble, so they cannot freely circulate in the blood. They need a carrier. So example included sex steroids such as testosterone and adrenal steroids such as cortisol, corticosteroid, mineralocorticoid, androgens, estrogens, and progesterones. So steroid hormones, they are hormones from the adrenal cortex and ovaries and placenta. So for example, here we have androgen, estrogen, progesterone from the gonads, ovary, and testes, and also from the adrenal cortex, like adrenal steroids such as cortisol or glucocorticoid, mineralocorticoid, so, and all they derived from the cholesterol. So steroid hormones, the structure of steroid hormones, such as we have in ovary, we have estradiols and estrogen. And in the adrenal cortex, we have aldosterone and cortisol. So aldosterone, which is derived from the adrenal cortex, they are steroid hormones, and cortisol, which is also derived from the adrenal cortex, in the cortex of the kidney, it's also steroid hormones. So they all steroid hormones, lipid soluble hormones. So, and also this next classification or next characteristic which we can classify hormones according to is the site of action. So the first one, it was chemical nature, chemical structure, but now it is site of action, where they actually bind. So the secretion can be categorized by the site of action relative to the site of secretion. So we have autocrine secretion, paracrine secretion, and endocrine secretion. So the autocrine secretion, the substance released by the cells or hormones released by the cells that affect the secreting cell itself, like catecholamines, like neuroperipherin. It's released by the neurosecretory cells in the adrenal medulla, and norepinephrine itself inhibits the further release by that cell, which is also an example of direct negative feedback. So it acts on the same cell, the cell itself secreting the hormone, and it acts on the same cell. Okay, and we have paracrine. Paracrine is the paracrine secretion, or what does that mean? Paracrine is a substance released by the cells, and it affects neighboring cells. No need to go outside into the blood and then act on the distance, but it is acting on the neighboring cells. So autocrine in the same itself, the cell itself. Paracrine, it acts on the neighboring cells, which is a closed cell, not released into the bloodstream, like histamine, released at the site of injury to constrict blood vessels, wall, and stop bleeding. So histamine is an example for paracrine. So paracrine and autocrine hormones, if you see here, we have a local, this is a local communication. Paracrine and autocrine is a signal act on the same, autocrine signal act on the same cell that secreted them. Paracrine signals that secreted by one cell and diffuse into adjacent cells. So this is an example or showing autocrine secreting the substance and act on the same cell. So it has a receptor for the same its hormone. But paracrine, it acts on the neighboring cell. Okay, so it has a receptor, neighboring cell has a receptor and act on it. So it is direct and local cell-to-cell communication. It is called cell-to-cell communication. So it has a signal chemicals diffused into the target. Autocrine receptor on the same cell. Paracrine has a receptor on the neighboring cells, not so away or far away from itself.